Hey guys, welcome to Cold Blood Creations. So in this video, we're bringing you another bearded dragon video. So if you haven't checked out our last one, we will link it in the description box below. In this video, we're going to be covering the bearded dragon nutrition, calcium, and UVB light. Now, I just wanted to tell you guys that we got so many questions, and even though we're not answering every single one of them in this video from our last dragon video, we wanted to squeeze in as much detail in this video as possible with the nutrition. So we will have upcoming videos on bearded dragons. Just stay tuned for those, and hopefully we can answer any question you have as far as keeping a bearded dragon healthy and happy. So one of the questions and comments that we received a lot from our last video was, can bearded dragons digest mealworms? This actually brings us to our first point of this video, which is very important, and that is to not overfeed your dragon.
So many times a dragon owner will open the cage and they'll find a small clump of what appears to be undigested mealworms or superworms. Now, the problem that you're seeing here is not the result of a dragon's inability to digest. The problem is they will gorge themselves and eat so much that it's not that they can't digest it, it's just that they have overeating and they will regurge. So when you go to look at that in the cage, you see a clump of what appears to be half-digested mealworms or superworms. The problem is not feeding mealworms, the problem is overfeeding your dragon. What we suggest you do is to count out your mealworms or your superworms one at a time. Feed your dragon, and if they have the ability to digest that many, then you can slowly increase the number of food items as your dragon grows. However, if you feed, let's say, 8 mealworms or 8 superworms to an adult dragon, and you find this clump of half-digested mealworms, then know that that's too many and back off by a couple food items during your next feeding.
So despite what you might have already heard, don't overfeed your dragons. It's not healthy. Obesity and bearded dragons, even just like your dogs and your cats, it's just not healthy for animals. So make sure that you're feeding them enough to keep them full, but not all they want. So the next question and comments that we received a lot were questions concerning the nutritional values of certain food items for bearded dragons.
So for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that the majority of our viewers are going to acquire their bearded dragons as babies. So we're going to talk for a moment about nutritional requirements of baby dragons. Now, because bearded dragons are omnivores, they can and should eat a varied diet. Even though a dragon could eat crickets or superworms or roaches its entire life, doesn't necessarily mean that it should. Just like we like to vary our diet, your dragon will be much happier and healthy if you vary some of the food items that you offer it. Now, baby dragons are going to require a good amount of protein because obviously their body and their muscular systems are growing, and they're also going to provide a lot of calcium because they need to support the growth of their skeletal system. So we're going to talk about feeder insects, which for baby dragons should make up about 80% of their diet. So let's talk about crickets, the nutritional value of crickets, because crickets are often a staple in the diet of American bearded dragons. Now, crickets are going to be about 78% moisture when we're talking about baby crickets. The vast majority, up to about 80% of them, aren't nothing but water. The protein level in a baby cricket is going to be roughly about 15%, and the fat content is about 3%. Now, an adult cricket has a little bit different nutritional value. Adult crickets are about 70% water, 21% protein, and roughly 7% fat. So crickets are a good food item. However, they're just a little more inconvenient than some of the other food items we're going to talk about. Now, when it comes to mealworms, mealworms are certainly probably one of the most controversial food items to feed your dragon. In fact, we received numerous comments saying that mealworms have so much fat in them that they should never be used for a food item. Now, while it is true, mealworms do have a high fat content, they do not have the highest fat content of any of the popular feeder insects. The truth about mealworms are that mealworms are about 62% water. So the vast majority of your mealworms, just like your cricket, is going to be moisture content. However, the protein is about 19%, about the same as a cricket, but the fat content is around 13%. So they are more fatty than the crickets. However, they're not as fat as some of the other insects we're going to talk about in a moment. Now, keep in mind that these are baby dragons. They're going to be very active. They're going to be running, climbing, digging, hopefully all the behaviors associated with youth in your dragon. So a higher fat content's not going to be detrimental to a dragon that is going to be moving and burning off a great deal of that fat as energy. Now, we're going to talk about another staple insect that is readily accessible in the pet trade, and that being the superworm. Now, superworms have less moisture than both crickets or mealworms. So when it comes to actual meat, you're getting more bang for your buck with the superworms. They come in at about 58% moisture content. The protein of superworms is about 20%, which makes it very equivalent to the cricket, and the fat content is about 18%. So far they have a good source of protein, but the fat content is a little bit higher than both the cricket and the mealworms. However, remember, it's not detrimental to the health of your growing dragons if they're getting a little extra fat content in their diet. And if you have females that are breeding and laying eggs, having a little extra fat in their diet would also not hurt them as well. Contrary to some of the comments that we received that mealworms were the highest in fat content and therefore shouldn't be used, well, that's simply not true. Of the popular readily accessible feeder insects, waxworms reign supreme when it comes to fat content. Waxworms come in at about 25% fat and about roughly 14% protein. So the only time we would recommend feeding waxworms to a dragon is if you're trying to put some extra weight on a female who has just laid a clutch of eggs. One of the other comments that we received a lot is about roaches. Now, personally, we used to raise roaches. I think they're disgusting. That's just my opinion. See, unlike crickets and superworms and mealworms and waxworms, roaches don't have a problem crawling right up the side of a plastic or a glass enclosure. So you've got to be careful that you don't allow roaches to escape. They're about 70% moisture. That means that 70% of a roach is basically nothing but additional water. The protein content's about 19%, makes it equivalent to crickets, a little less than superworms, and right there about the same as mealworms. Now, when it comes to the fat content, they are pretty low in fat. They're roughly about 6% fat. So if you want to deal with roaches, then, that certainly is your choice. Now, we're going to talk about the calcium requirement for your dragons. And as bad as I hate to admit this, there's probably no insect that is going to give you more calcium in terms of milligrams per kilogram than the roach. However, crickets come in pretty good at about 400 milligrams per kilogram of calcium. Now, a better way of providing calcium to your dragons is through supplemental calcium. There are many brands of calcium, and we're not endorsing one brand over another, but you can find these in pet stores and reptile shops and even reptile expos, these little jar of calcium supplements. Now, a lot of people will ask us, should I sprinkle the calcium on my insects? And while there's certainly nothing wrong with doing that, what we find is that when we put it on insects, we end up wasting more of our calcium than our dragons actually get. Earlier I told you that the baby bearded dragons are going to have a diet that's going to consist of about 80% insects or meat and protein, as opposed to about 20% vegetable matter. Now, sometimes baby dragons can be a little finicky. They're a little picky when it comes to eating vegetables when they're young. However, as a dragon grows, they tend to take to the vegetables a little more, and by the time they're adults, their diet should almost flip-flop. An adult dragon should be eating a lot more vegetable matter and a lot less protein because their body doesn't require as much protein because they're no longer growing. That being said, we're going to talk a little bit about how we maintain our adult dragons both in and out of the breeding season. So during a normal maintenance week, that means during the time of year that we're not breeding our dragons, our adults are going to eat salad about 6 days a week. Now that salad will consist of mustard greens, collard greens, squash, carrots, different things like that. We like to make it varied. Now, I will caution you about something. People were asking me about lettuce. And the truth of the matter is lettuce has little to no nutritional value, and there's really no point in feeding lettuce. There's so much moisture content in lettuce, sometimes it'll make your dragon's stool a little bit runny. When they take a poop, it'll be kind of nasty. So we tell people to avoid lettuce. There's no reason to feed it. Stick with good greens like mustard greens and collard greens.
So each and every morning I go outside to our garden because we grow our own vegetables, and I pick some vegetables for them to eat. Now when they're babies, of course, they're going to have to eat vegetables that are cut up very fine, very tiny, nothing too big for them to swallow. So after the vegetables are cut up and are in their little bowls, I like to spray it a little bit with a spray bottle, not too much where it's like really runny wet. I just want to sprinkle it just a little bit, and then after that I add the calcium on top, just sprinkle a little bit on. You don't have to do this every time you feed them salad. I normally do it about every other day.
The other thing people mentioned to us was fruit. Some people advise that you not feed fruit to a dragon at all. We have been feeding fruit for almost all the years we've been keeping dragons, but I will caution you to keep their fruit intake at a very, very minimum. One fruit that we have found that bearded dragons absolutely love, and that is blueberries and strawberries. But if you're going to give your dragon any fruit at all, you want to keep it at a bare minimum and maybe only as a treat. Okay, now we want to talk about vitamin D3, because vitamin D3 is necessary in order for calcium to do its job properly in your dragon's body. Now, the main source of vitamin D3 should come through UVB. Now, I want to caution you about something here. A lot of people stick a light bulb, just an incandescent light bulb, over their dragon cage, and they believe that their dragon's getting UVB because of that. That's not necessarily true. All light produces UV rays, but there's certain lights that produce UVB that are going to give your dragon the required D3. However, all that aside, we still maintain that the best source of vitamin D3 is produced by natural sunlight, or the exposure to natural sunlight. We do recommend, if at all possible, you can take your dragon outside for short periods of time. Allow them to get natural sunlight. It'll make your dragons healthier, and you'll also see their mood changes when they go outside. A lot of times your dragons will become way more alert, and you'll notice the beards of the males tend to blacken up when they go out into the natural sunlight. And we also, one of the other things we want to caution you about is if you live in a very humid environment like we do, you keep natural sunlight to a minimum, because you don't want your dragon out there breathing a lot of that really humid air. Now, if you live in places that are more arid than what we are, sometimes you can even house your dragons outside. However, we will caution you, if you live in the southeast and you do take your dragons outside, two things you want to be mindful of. Number one, birds are a natural predator to dragons. So if you have a lot of birds in your area like we do, because we live in the country, your dragon may freak out a little bit when they hear birds chirping or see birds flying underneath. You want to make sure you got a good hold on your dragon so that they don't run away. The second thing is lightning bugs. If your bearded dragon eats a lightning bug, it will die. So be very, very careful when you're outside not to let your dragons eat lightning bugs if they're native to your area. All right, one thing I want to caution you about, because somebody's going to watch this video and they're going to say, well, Ronnie said you don't need a UVB bulb over your cage because you can use natural sunlight. Now, the fact of the matter is we work with these animals all day, every day. This is what we do for a living. Therefore, we are available to take our dragons out anytime we see fit to do so. Most of you guys are going to be busy with jobs or school, and you're not going to have the ability to take your dragon out. Therefore, don't let natural sunlight cause you not to provide the dragon with a UVB bulb. Now, once again, we also want to remind you that a UVB bulb and a basking bulb is not necessarily the same thing. Your dragon would appreciate a good hot basking bulb in order to thermoregulate its body, but a UVB bulb to produce the vitamin D3. And hopefully that'll clear that up. If you guys have any more questions, just leave them down in the comments below. Alright guys, we appreciate y'all watching this video, and I just want to say there are so many comments and questions that we've received because of our bearded dragon videos there is no way we have the time to answer each one individually. So what we're going to do is choose a question, and we will answer that question in an upcoming video. And just, you guys stay tuned. It may be your question that we choose.
Okay guys, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and we will see you guys in our next video.
Thanks
Bye.
for watching. Hey guys, when it comes to bloopers, I'm the king. I reign supreme. The nice thing about bearded dragons is that they won't eat my protein bar.
Wow.
That didn't make sense.
You're gonna get it one of these days. So in this stop it. She's behind the camera dancing right now.
Yeah, but if you smack it on camera, everyone's gonna unsubscribe.
Okay, so really quickly, I wanted to tell you guys, even though we already showed you in our last video that bearded dragons can digest mealworms, we were still having a few people in the comment section saying no, they cannot. Guys, come with me for a second. Just come on.
You guys see this?